Hello, welcome back. We are in Leviticus chapter 3. Go back and watch the first two and the intro video, and that will help fill in some of those blanks. This is an amazing book, but it is a little hard to understand. And we're going to walk through that. I'm not doing everything, but I'm going to give you a pretty good little appetite for it. And that's what you really want. You want to ask God to show you even more. And that's where we're going with this. I understand the people that will say, well, you don't need Leviticus. Well, here's why you do, and this should be your response when anybody says, what's the point of learning Leviticus? How do you know what Jesus did, what sacrifice he fulfilled, if you don't know what sacrifices God commanded? And that's where this is. Also, this is how the priests are supposed to live. We're the priest in the kingdom of God if you have accepted Yeshua as the Messiah. So that's why you need to know it. Most of it needs a temple to be done, but not all of it. Some of it we can do now, but more importantly, this isn't about salvation. Leviticus was given to a people that had already been redeemed, already been saved. This is for saved people. It's not a way to get saved. That is still through Jesus, the Messiah. That's it. That's the only way. So let's jump into Leviticus chapter 3. And I'm going to read from the New Living Translation because there's not a lot of translation problems here other than they put Lord every time that God is used. But if you present an animal from the herd as a peace offering to the Lord, it may be a male or a female, but it must no defects. Lay your hand on the animal's head and slaughter it at the entrance of the tabernacle. Then Aaron's sons, the priest, will splatter its blood against all sides of the altar. The priest must present part of the peace offering as a special gift to the Lord. This includes all the fat around the internal organs, the two kidneys and the fat around them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver. These must be removed with the kidneys, and Aaron's sons will burn them up on top of the burnt offering on the wood burning on the altar. It is a special gift, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. If you present an animal from the flock as a peace offering to the Lord, it may be male or female, but it must have no defects. If you present a sheep as your offering, bring it to the Lord. Lay your hand on its head and slaughter it in front of the tabernacle. Aaron's sons will then splatter the sheep's blood against all sides of the altar. The priest must present the fat of this peace offering as a special gift to the Lord. This includes the fat of the broad tail cut off near the backbone, all the fat around the internal organs, the two kidneys and the fat around them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver. These must be removed with the kidneys, and the priest will burn them on the altar. It is a special gift of food presented to the Lord. If you present a goat as your offering, bring it to the Lord, lay your hand on its head, and slaughter it in front of the tabernacle. Aaron's sons will soon splatter the goat's blood against all sides of the altar. The priest must present part of this offering as a special gift to the Lord. This includes all the fat around the internal organs, the two kidneys and the fat around them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver. These must be removed with the kidneys, and the priest will burn them on the altar. It is a special gift of food, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. All the fat belongs to the Lord. You must never eat any fat or blood. This is a permanent law for you, and it must be observed from generation to generation wherever you live. Now, that Leviticus 3:16 is kind of like John 3:16. It's really easy to remember. All the fat belongs to the Lord. I like that verse. Not really that relevant here, but there was a universal language. It changed, and many languages appeared almost overnight. Scientists have been trying to figure this out forever, and this is kind of helped explain it. It happened at the Tower of Babel. It was Jehovah who caused it to happen, and so people would disperse and repopulate the world more completely as he commanded, because they decided they didn't want to do that. Something else happened. the perverted worship led by Nimrod. The Bible calls the Babylon mystery religions. So after the flood, the world consisted of only of Noah's immediate family when they got off the boat. So all of Noah's family believed and practiced the one and only pure worship of the true God. Noah's descendants started to go their separate ways and add their thoughts and feelings and desires that sprang up from their sinful nature. Each of the world's new religions took essential doctrine of the true God and they modified it and twisted some of the meanings and practices. They all have a flood story. Every religion has a flood story. Most have a chief or supreme God, a male, his wife, and their son. Because God's plan of having his son come into the world by means of a woman was known from the earliest days. Almost all pagan religions believe there was a creation and there will be an end to the world. So what we see God doing with Moses is Israel and the law is reestablishing his justice and worship system, the way it's supposed to be done. So he's cleaning things up and removing basically the things that didn't belong. So a third type of sacrifice here. The peace offering has nothing to do with atoning for sins. The ziva is a lower class of offering. Only parts of the animal are burned up on in the peace offering. Male and female animals may be used too for the peace offering. It is the fat around the liver, kidneys, and entrails that is to be burned on the altar. This type of animal fat is not eaten. If a sheep is offered as the peace offering, the fat from the sheep's tail is used. And one of the reasons is because the fat was used in a lot of pagan religions to do all kinds of other things. So he takes that out. That may not have been his only reason. That was just one of the reasons. So far, the instructions had to do with what happens in the tabernacle. Now, not eating fat or blood is extended to everywhere the Hebrews settle. So he's kind of created this new thing. This should be true always. The purpose of the peace offering was to maintain a peaceful relationship with God, to demonstrate obedience and loyalty. None of these sacrifices, rituals, and following of the law brought redemption. It was all given to a people that had already been redeemed. So, rather, God redeemed Israel and then he gave them the laws and the rituals. So, when somebody says, well, following the law, trying to be saved is a waste of time. Yeah, because that's not what it was created for. None of these rituals were created for that. They were all given to people that had already been redeemed. So the point was, how do you maintain peace with God? And this is how. Now we have Jesus Christ, Jesus the Christ, who satisfied those peace offering requirements. So we have peace with God, and therefore we should be obedient to God. So they first offered the Olah, the Olah, which is designed to gain God's attention and favor, and then next is the peace offering. The vow offering was typical to make a vow to God that if he helped you, you would do something for him. Now we've all done that at some point. God, if you'll do this, I'll do that. In Genesis 28, chapter 28, verse 16 through 22, it says this. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. But he was also afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven. The next morning, Jacob got up very early. He took the stone he had rested his head against. He set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil all over it. He named the place Bethel, which means house of God, although it was previously called Luz. Then Jacob made this vow, if God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I've set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. Jump ahead in Genesis 35, 1 through 4, it says this. Then God said to Jacob, Get ready and move to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." So Jacob told everyone in his household, "Get rid of your pagan idols, purify yourselves, and put on clean clothing. We are now going to Bethel, where I will build an altar to the God who answered my prayers when I was in distress. He has been with me wherever I have gone." So they gave Jacob all their pagan idols and earrings, and he buried them under the great tree near Shechem. And then verse 13 through 15 says this: "Then God went up from the place where he had spoken to Jacob. Jacob set up a stone pillar to mark the place where God had spoken to him. Then he poured wine over it as an offering to God and anointed the pillar with olive oil. And Jacob named the place Bethel, which means house of God, because God had spoken to him here." So the vow offering in Leviticus 3 was given 5 centuries earlier by Jacob. And when we study Genesis and Exodus before Leviticus, we see this pattern that's coming out. And that's why it's important to study this, because otherwise we wouldn't see it. So what Jacob did was customary for his day. The free will offering was an expression of gratitude. All 3 types of peace offerings, Ziva, ended with the sacred meal, typically involving both the worshiper and the priest. We will not find the term peace offering or Ziva in the New Testament. So you need to know that in order to understand what's going on in the New Testament. In Acts, when Paul paid for the offerings of the 4 men, he was paying for the sacrificial animals that were being used in this. When we're done studying Leviticus, as you read the New Testament, you'll find yourself recognizing the various kinds of sacrificial offerings. And that's important. Otherwise, what basis would we have for understanding that? So the Olah first got God's attention. The worshiper was allowed to come near the Lord. Then the worshiper may offer a gift to God. Now, the gift is more in nature of a tribute. It's a required gift, a ransom, so to speak. So the peace offering was built on the Olah in the Mishnah. The peace offering established a fellowship, shalom, peace between the worshiper and God that could not occur until God found the worshiper acceptable and a tribute was paid. Together, the 3 offerings established and maintained peace and fellowship with Jehovah. So Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, is the fulfilled type that is being presented in Leviticus. No one can approach God using a different method. It's only through Yeshua. So the first thing that his death and resurrection did was it made us as believers acceptable to God. It all starts there. God had no interest in our gifts if we're not acceptable to him. And Yeshua did that. That's why accepting Yeshua makes you and I acceptable to God. So there's a lot that has to happen before God is interested in dealing with our sinful behaviors. First, our nature must be dealt with. Then our behavior. This is the God-ordained nature and order of things. This is the way he set it up. We don't become acceptable to God because we stop trespassing. Rather, Christ is, as the Olah, the offering that allows us to come before God. So stopping our bad behavior doesn't change anything for God. It's accepting Christ as our Olah that makes us acceptable to learn how to change our behavior. So Yeshua's death or sacrifice in this realm makes us acceptable to the Father. If we accept what Jesus did by believing in it and trusting him, after we become acceptable to him, he begins to deal with our trespasses. That's how it works. Once we get in, then he starts to change us. We don't have to change first. So God was showing us in a way the human mind could kind of understand, showing us the principles, the patterns, the many aspects of sin and atonement and forgiveness. And in all this, he's showing his holiness and his justice. That's the value of Leviticus. And that's what we specifically learn in Leviticus chapter 3. So don't forget, pray, ask God to show you even more, and share this with as many people as you can. Love God, love people, and change the world.